I just want to do God's will.
The kind of revolution that the world needs is a Christian revolution.
If you want a miracle, you've got to expect it to happen.
You are the recipients of God's grace and God's blessings, and you rejoice in that reality.
Welcome to Life Today Live. How do you explain the unexplainable? That's a question that my guests today are exploring in a couple of things. A film that opens next week in theaters, as well as a book that expands even with more stories. There's a thing called Show Me Your Glory, film and ebook, and it explores the true stories of people who have faced that situation. And we'll show you the trailer here in a little bit. But I have the creators of Show Me Your Glory with me, Eric and Kameron Swithin. And they're going to give you a little bit behind the scenes of the inspiration, the process, and some of the things that you will see. And I got to tell you, this is a fascinating one. So appreciate you guys being here today. You're going to want to hit that share button and let other people know. Eric and Kameron, welcome to Life Today Live. Great to have you on the program.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us on.
So, looking into the bios of you two, Eric, U.S. Marine Corps combat veteran, Kameron, lawyer for many years, but now you're running Abba Heart Ministries. How did you guys make that move? Because that's an interesting career path.
Yeah.
I'll say.
Yeah, not necessarily a straight line by any means. Well, it started a long time ago. I was absolutely miserable in my job as a businessman. A management consultant in the oil and gas business was my final job, working on the 58th floor of a skyscraper. And I remember I just had a birthday, and the next morning I was literally on my hands and knees, weeping like a baby, crying out to God in prayer, like, God, I am absolutely miserable. I'm so tired of chasing the American dream. Would you just reveal to me what your plan is for my life? And it sounds absolutely bizarre, but in that moment, I knew that I was chasing money as security because I'd grown up so poor that I had this idea. If I had enough money, I would never have to go through what I went through as a kid. And about 40 minutes later, and the reason I know that is because I immediately wrote it in my journal, but about 40 minutes later, I got a call from a random stranger who reminded me of promises from God that I had made when I was a brand new Christian at 18 years old, that I was going to serve him all the days of my life, and that I was called to be a minister, and that I had ignored that call and I had disobeyed him. And it was time for me to resign from my job and go to seminary ASAP. And so I'm like, all right, God, if this is from you, you're going to have to convince my wife. She gets home that night, talks to this lady, and she hangs up the phone after like an hour-long conversation, and she goes, I guess you're going to seminary.
Yep.
So I resigned that week as a management consultant from the biggest firm in the world and immediately enrolled in seminary.
Exactly. And a couple of years later, we had our first child, Mackenzie Marie. And after my maternity leave, I went back to corporate law. And I just realized that I did not love it enough to justify being away from my daughter. And so that was, and my mom had actually recently unexpectedly passed away from a stroke. And I just realized that life is short and none of us actually know when we're going to die. Any of us could die today in a car accident. And so I decided that I should step back from corporate law and come alongside Eric in full-time ministry. And the rest is history. We've been doing that since 2017 full-time. And now God has us making faith-based films and writing books, and we're just along for the ride. It's a lot of fun.
I love it. So you're at a Baptist seminary, is that right, Eric?
I initially went to Fuller Theological Seminary for my master's, and now I'm at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary for my doctorate. Yeah.
Okay. So I grew up Southern Baptist, and the type of encounter, I don't want to cast my Baptist. This sounds more like a thing that I would expect from my charismatic friends, right? As an Oral Roberts University graduate, I heard that all the time. That like, oh, God, said this to me, and it changed it. And we don't do that so much in the Baptist church. But I have to ask you, what what did that do for you when, like, you felt like God was massively intervening to change your career path, to change your life? It changed the trajectory of your family. I mean, it changed everything. How did you sort of reconcile that? I mean, obviously you're open to it somewhat, but I'm just curious how that impacted you.
Well, in 2000, January 4th, 8:30 in the morning, I had a supernatural encounter with God on my deathbed as a young man. I was living in the streets and I was having severe withdrawals from drugs. I had been stabbed in a gang fight a year prior. I mean, I was as rough as they get. So, you have to understand my context. I had no religious upbringing. I had no idea what Christianity was. And I have this radical encounter with the divine at 18, give my life to God, sold out. And I've had multiple encounters like that since. And as I read the Bible, I see nothing but miracle after miracle and all these wild things that don't even make sense. They're so bizarre. It's like if we are to say that being weird disqualifies us from doing certain things, then that disqualifies a good portion of the Bible. I mean, Jesus said, go catch a fish. There'll be your token or a coin in its mouth. That's how you'll pay the temple tax. I mean, some weird stuff. So for me, it's just kind of a natural way of living out my faith. And then coming into the Baptist community, what I love is they are grounded in the Word.
Yes.
So I call myself affectionately a Baptist-costal. We both do.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of the wild child at NOBTS. They're like, wait, what?
Okay.
You believe what?
But I will say there's a professor at NOBTS that approved our film. He, looked through it to see if there was anything theologically inaccurate in the film. And he completely signed off on it. So we have a Baptist stamp of approval on Show Me Your Glory.
That's right.
that's kind of funny, but I appreciate that because there's some balance, right, that is due, and that's one thing I noticed about the film is that it's not. And again, if I don't know where you're at watching, but it's not just this kind of weird touchy-feely thing. There's some real meat to this in the stories, and in fact, you know what? I'll let you guys take a look at the trailer for Show Me Your Glory. Again, this opens up next week in theaters, next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, May 13th, 14th, and 15th. So check this out, and then we'll be right back with the creators, Eric and Kameron Swithin.
Since the beginning of time, supernatural events have taken place.
Not only did Cooper have cancer, he had terminal cancer.
Science is a way of describing how the natural world functions.
The feeling was beyond anything I've ever felt before.
It doesn't say anything about the supernatural world.
It opened my life to dark forces that ruined my mental health.
We've got hundreds of millions of people claiming that they've seen miracles.
And I suddenly break out in this brilliant bright light. Like if you were in your flesh, you would be like...
When the supernatural crashes into human suffering, everything changes.
Finley had a skull fracture along with spinal fracture. And 3 days later, there's no fracture in his spine.
For people in the midst of their suffering,
Cooper was healthy until he wasn't.
it is incredibly natural to question if God is still in the miracle business, then why doesn't he perform more miracles?
What science can uniquely do is show the condition of the person beforehand.
I cannot explain that.
And the condition of the person afterwards.
And that moment in the hopelessness, I felt literally lighter, and I knew that I'm physically forgiven.
And the surgeon goes, I don't know what happened.
Bro, I know what happened, dude. I'll tell you what happened.
Wow. Okay. You can see you got to be interested in that. But just even if I don't know what you believe, if you believe anything at all, you can't deny, the stories of people. And as Eric was pointing out, the Bible is full of stories like that. So we have to at least consider it. And for someone like me, who's a hardcore believer, it's just really cool and inspirational. How did you guys decide we're going to do this? Because this is not people. We see films come out, we sit home on our couches, we critique them. We don't get all that it takes to actually put this together. How long did you guys work on this?
Well, I'd say for over 20 years, I've been studying in philosophy what they call the problem of evil. I returned from combat in Iraq and had a major crisis of faith. How could God be sovereign and all loving, a perfect God, and allow that kind of stuff to take place on that level? And then shortly after that, in 2004, the Indian Ocean earthquake happened and a tsunami killed 250,000 people.
Yeah.
And it just exacerbated this crisis of faith I was having. So I've had to study this very, very deeply for a long time to learn how to trust God, even though we don't understand so many things. And even though this life seems so cruel at times. And so I think that was kind of the Genesis story. But then one day we were reading during our quiet time, and I was reading about Rahab at Jericho and how she meets these spies, the Israelite spies. And she said something, and it just struck me like a lightning bolt. She said, I had heard what your God did, leading you out of Egypt, parting the sea. I had heard. So in other words, someone had shared a testimony about what God had done. And now she's like, man, I'm partnering with these guys. So here is a testimony that changes this woman's life completely. She's a Canaanite prostitute, which is it's an Egyptian outpost. And then she ends up in the genealogy of the Messiah, Jesus, which is wild.
Yeah.
And so then we read Psalm 96:3. It says, declare the glory of the Lord among all nations and proclaim his mighty works among all people. And I just started saying the power of testimony. What would it look like if we scoured the earth for some of the most powerful stories we can get our hands on and then share those stories on the big screen? And we felt God tell us to do that. We thought in our research, there's just with 11 countries on 2 continents, over 200 million people reporting having experienced a miracle personally. And if you were to take just 1% of those, let's say you got rid of 99% of them. If you were to just take 1% of those stories as being true, then there is something to the miraculous that is designed to lead people to faith. Jesus' first miracle, turning water into wine, it said his glory was manifest, and then from there on, his disciples believed. So we need to tell the testimonies of people. We need to steward our own stories, and we need to be telling about what God is doing in the earth. Look at what he did over there in Iran. Look at what he did over there. And I believe that's going to bless people tremendously.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't doubt it. How did you pare it down to 16 stories for the book and just 8 stories? Is that correct in the film?
Mm-hmm. That is correct.
Yeah, she can go into a couple of examples, maybe Dwayne Miller and stuff. But, ultimately we wanted to find miracles that fit within 3 categories. The first are miraculous healings, really for the seeker and the skeptic. Evidence-based miracles. We have 200 physicians working on this individual. And when all was said and done and he's healed, they had no intervention leading to his healing, and they had no idea how to explain the after scans. So we really wanted to present some evidence, right? She, as a lawyer, is like, I wanted to, stand up in a court of law.
Right.
Me, as an investigator in the military, I wanted to make sure the evidence was there. The second category is supernatural encounters. Let's find people who have had some wild supernatural encounter and it transformed their life radically. Let's find the most radical stories we can find. I mean, that in and of itself is tremendous evidence. Someone is headed in this direction, they have this encounter, and then they're headed in that direction.
Right.
And we've got some doozies. Think of a Hezbollah terrorist who has killed people in the name of Allah many, many times, who has this encounter and then disavows his Muslim faith and converts, and has been converting Muslims to Christianity for 30 years now. So wild stories like that. And then the third category are those who did not get the miracle they prayed for. Tragically.
Yeah.
Which is the most common thing that happens, right? Miracles are not that common. And yet their response to their suffering was miraculous in and of itself. And those around them that witnessed it and saw their reaction were forever changed. I mean, this tragedy has impacted millions of people, will continue to impact more.
Yeah. And all of the 16 stories in our book are very, very powerful stories. In fact, Eric shares 3 of his stories. I share 3 of my stories in the book that we do not include in the film. But God illuminated the stories for us that he wanted us to put in the film. Each step of the way, we asked God for very clear direction from him, and where his peace was, that's where we went as far as what to put in the film, what to put in the book. But what's amazing is that each and every story makes him known. Like that we feel compelled. That is our mission, to make God known and to put his love on display for everyone to see. Like that is what we're out to do. And we're excited to see how people respond to it.
Well, I have a feeling. Have you done some screenings? You have a little bit of an idea how people respond to it, don't you? Yeah. I bet it's. I bet it wrecks some people and inspires others and makes some think.
We actually had one atheist request to watch the film 4 times. So we told her, yes, you can watch it. Here you go. You can watch it as many times as you want. She watched it 4 times.
You summarized it perfectly, though. I mean, for the saint, for those of us who believe, it sort of inspires this childlike wonder and faith again. Like, you know what? When my child gets sick or someone I love has a prognosis that's really bad, instead of immediately thinking about a doctor, why don't I pray for them, like the Bible says, and at least ask God to heal them and see what he'll do. Let's just see what he'll do. And he may not do it, but guess what? He might. James, in the book of James, it says you have not because you didn't even ask.
Right.
So, and then for the seeker and for the skeptic, as I mentioned, I think providing ample evidence. A lot of stories didn't make it into the movie because they just didn't withstand the scrutiny that we put them under.
Right.
So I think there's great evidence for the seeker and the skeptic to say, wow, I haven't thought of that before. And bringing in some of these philosophers that were absolutely incredible to help us reason in our minds and wrestle in our hearts with some of these incredibly difficult questions. I just can't imagine how a seeker and a skeptic wouldn't be utterly impacted by it.
Yeah. Well, Kameron, let me ask you this. Will it stand up in court?
Yes, that's so funny that you say that, because that's something we decided that when we were vetting all of the stories, we said we are not going to select a story unless it can stand up in the court of law. So it's actually really funny that you said that. I mean, we have so much evidence that proves that these supernatural experiences or miraculous encounters and healings and miraculous responses are very, very well documented and would most definitely stand up in a court of law, or we would not have put them in the film or in the book. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I got to say, I love that, because my problem is not that I doubt God. My problem is that I doubt people, Right. And so a lot of times I hear some stories and I'm going, okay. I mean, I know God can do whatever he wants. I don't question that, but the people are people. All right, let me show people a couple things. This is a cover of the book, which you can get, an ebook. You can get it at Amazon. I'll mention other locations. The website also is showmeyourglory.com, and when you go there, you will see information about the film again next week in theaters. So if you're watching this early enough, you'll definitely want to catch it. Get your group together. You know what? I'm in a small group at my church. I'm going to have to look into that. This might be a real good thing if I can get it together in time. But what a great idea. Take your group, your Sunday school group, your small group, and it'll bless you, no doubt about it. And it'll spark some amazing conversations, I'm sure. Eric, I have to ask you this, because you mentioned 3 categories of people. And I'm kind of in that third category, where a family member you pray for, everybody prays for, she believes, we believe for healing. And she dies at much too young of an age. And I do think, one of the hardest things to confront is sort of a theology of suffering. But you talk about miracles that are in the Bible. Suffering's in the Bible too. You know this. How do you approach the suffering that we all face at some point on some level, and the disappointment, frankly, that can come from seeing other people's miracles, praying for a miracle, not getting your own miracle? Because it's scriptural, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, in the book, we lay out exhaustively so many things that will encourage someone in that position, because that's been us in that position. She found her mother dead on the floor the day after Christmas. Her dad's passed. My dad suffered from cancer for 3 years. You know, of course we prayed for a miracle, right? But ultimately, there is so much that can come from suffering that's positive. We tend to want to avoid suffering, and we gravitate towards comfort. And we're trying to build ourselves heaven here. And ultimately, with my dad, for example, he said that cancer was the best thing that ever happened to him. And keep in mind, I mean, he was agonizing for 3 years. He says it was the best thing that ever happened to him, A, because he was reconciled to a loved one that they, you know, were estranged and for many reasons. But most importantly, it brought him to salvation. He would not have been brought to his knees had he not gone through that. And now he gets to live forever because of that. So he wouldn't have replaced his experience. At the end of the day, though, if I had an elevator speech to give somebody that was really wrestling with that, it comes down to 2 Corinthians chapter 4:17, that ultimately this momentary light affliction is producing within us an eternal, immeasurable weight of glory. So it's momentary and it's light, meaning we're just a mist. I mean, this life, your life expectancy in America is 76 years. I just got back from doing missions work in Pakistan, where the life expectancy is about 55 years. In Jesus's day, life expectancy was 35 years. So, you know, life is just really, really short. I don't know about you, but like, I cannot believe my age, like how fast it's going. And my kids, I thought I was just holding them the other day, and now they're running around, you know, like little adults. It's wild how fast it goes. And affliction is light in that, in the grand scheme of eternity, it may seem like it's really severe here, but in the grand scheme of eternity, which is more than trillions of years, it's eternal, it's immeasurable. You know, we're reaping the benefits of the hard things we endure here, there. Right. So it's one of those things, and I've prayed this prayer before. It's one of the most dangerous, if not the most dangerous prayer you could ever pray. But it brings light to what I'm trying to communicate right now, which is, God, I give you permission to do to me whatever you need to do to make me as prepared for heaven as possible, so that I can enjoy heaven and enjoy you for all eternity as much as possible. Maximize your glory in me and through me, and maximize what I get to experience in heaven, no matter what that means here. And ultimately, if you pray that, you're asking for hurting. You know, this life is so brutal and so hard and so dark at times, but we have to put our faith in God. And as the book of Job teaches us, you either trust him or you don't. He's too mysterious. His thoughts are too high. His ways are too profound for us to ever grasp. And we have to get to a point where we just say, I trust that his character is perfect. I trust that he's fully in control. And I trust that there is a tremendous purpose and there's meaning behind this. And so I don't, as much as I'm in pain and as much as this is so confusing and so hard, God, I'm choosing to trust you. And I know there's eternal significance in this.
Absolutely.
Man, I'm with you. And, you know, if you look at the ultimate goal, yes, there are blessings in Scripture. There's a lot there. But Scripture says the ultimate goal for God in our lives is conforming us to the image of Christ. And I've heard what you said about your father from people who have endured awful, evil tragedies, crimes, and in addition to physical suffering, which is things like I wouldn't trade it, you know, and it's because of what God did in them, which kind of brings us back to the question of, okay, so if there is a work, a holy work that can be done in suffering, why would you have these miraculous interventions to alleviate suffering? Why wouldn't God just let all of us suffer? And obviously his sovereignty, he knows what he's doing. We're trying to figure it out. But I think that it's what you guys are showing in the film, which is this testimony of, yes, God does come into our lives, and sometimes he does it in ways that bring incredible surprise and joy, but it allows us to demonstrate, to show people his glory, like your film title says. And I think, he orchestrates a lot of these things, again, for the one purpose of reconciling us, a fallen, race, mankind, to him. And I guess that's what I'm hoping people will see in your film. What's sort of your bottom line when you roll this out, book, film, experience that people see? I mean, I think I know it, but I'd love to kind of hear it in your words, because you've put so much into this. What do you want people to walk away with when they leave that theater, when they put that chapter, that book down?
There's so much to that.
Yeah,
but,
there's a lot.
Being in other countries where the gospel is on the front lines, and where the risk of being a Christian, it could cost you your life.
Mm-hmm.
We see miracles all the time.
Yeah.
They're happening constantly around the world. There's so much coming out right now, books and movies and all kinds of documentation. We're in an era where science is enabling us to capture some of this miraculous content. We're able to see before and after scans, and nothing in between, no medical intervention in between, just prayer. All of this is just like the Bible, where God is showing, hey, I am Jesus, and I have the authority not only to forgive sins, but also the authority to heal. And I'm going to show you a demonstration of that to validate who I say I am. I'm God incarnate in the flesh. And that same validation with the apostles, they were able to do wonderful miracles in order to validate who they were and validate the scriptures. And we get to see them today because God is so kind to say, hey, occasionally I'm going to pop in and show my glory here and there because I want you to have faith and I want you to see that I'm real. So when people see this film, whether they believe or whether they don't, I don't care if they're a churchgoer who absolutely loves God and is faithfully following him, or if they're a devout atheist. I hope that when they walk out of the theater, A, they are asking deep questions. B, they really do believe God is real. Even if you're an atheist and you see this, you say, man, this has got to be from God.
Right.
And they're maybe even tempted to go scrutinize these stories and investigate for themselves, or not even our stories, just go investigate in general. But we really want people to see that we serve a loving God, even in the midst of a dark world. And he has an eternal purpose that's profound, and he's worth following, and he's worth trusting.
Exactly. And the third point that I think they would take away from it is that Jesus Christ is King. Like, we make it very clear in our film that not only is God real, but Jesus Christ is Lord. He is King. He is the only way to heaven. And like you followed up, to follow up on what the last thing you said, Eric, is even when we suffer, even when we don't get the miracle that we pray for, God is still there. He's still loving us, and he has a good purpose for allowing us to suffer. The pain is not for nothing.
Yeah. We just went through Easter and the reminder of the resurrection power. I mean, whatever is dead is supposed to stay dead, but God comes in and says, I got a little different story for you. So if you're suffering, you got to know that there's a resurrection power on the other side. But thank you both so much. I appreciate your time. I know you're doing quite a few of these interviews as we prep for the release of the film. Exciting. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate you guys out there. Hit the website, showmeyourglory.com. Go to the theaters. This actually supports filmmakers like Eric and Kameron in great ways. But if you're catching this a little late, you can go to the website, figure out how you can see it, and pick up the book. Take people with you. Let them know. Hit share. We'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.